Was the nuclear deal central to President Jacob Zuma's cabinet reshuffle in March? To answer that question, we have Democratic Alliance MP Gordon Mackay, who's head of their energy portfolio. Welcome, and could you try and answer that question?
Matt, it's a very simple answer. It's yes, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. The whole cabinet reshuffle is about facilitating and accelerating the nuclear deal. The appointment of Mr. Gigaba and Ms. Kubai as the new Minister of Energy. Sole mandate is get this thing through and get it through quickly.
That sounds like South Africans should be quite alerted to that. And the former Minister of Energy, her role there was obviously also steeped in questions. And at what point were we when she was removed?
Well, I think there's been this huge misconception that Jamat Peterson was, Zuma's woman on driving nuclear. It actually became clear really early on that she was actually not pushing the nuclear agenda. In actual fact, I think if anything, she made sure she pushed the renewables agenda. And I think part of the reason she pushed that so hard was very much to build new capacity into the electricity market from renewables so that the case for nuclear would be less and less. So we wouldn't need nuclear because we had all these other cheaper forms of energy coming online. At the end of when she was reshuffled, the minister had quite successfully tied government into a series of very specific knots around how it can and how quickly it can procure nuclear. Mostly we have the IRP process, which is, the Integrated Resources Process, which is an energy or electricity plan. It determines how South Africa can procure electricity from specific forms of energy, such as nuclear, such as renewables, such as coal. And in the plan that she presented and brought through Cabinet that was made public and for public consultation at the end of November last year, very much said that nuclear could be delayed. She then issued a ministerial determination in December, an updated determination, which while still saying South Africa would want to procure 9.6 gigawatts of electricity, it did, however, say that connection to the grid would be dependent upon the IRP or as updated. And as I've just said to you, the update says that we don't need nuclear until 2035. So essentially that even delays her determination, saying yes, at some point South Africa will procure nuclear, but that there's no rush and no hurry, that it has to be done now. So essentially, she's created a framework against which nuclear has been bogged down in terms of its potential procurement. And then from our perspective and as a political perspective, she's created a legal framework against which to test the rationality of any future decision for nuclear. So we have energy policy, which is the sole remit of the Department of Energy, and now we have Eskom wanting to procure nuclear. But Eskom can only procure on the basis of energy policy. And so essentially, any decision to procure nuclear that doesn't reflect the IRP in some way, shape or form will be subject to the test in the courts of, is it a rational decision? And remember, the courts have determined, the constitutional courts have determined that for a decision of government to be valid, it has to be perceived as rational. So we're going to question that very, very much.
Nuclear, at the end of the day, a lot of the concern all comes down to the money.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that. We've been downgraded to junk status by S&P and Fitch. How does that affect the rollout of nuclear, and what stumbling blocks and how could they fund it?
Well, I think everyone assumes that because of the downgrade, nuclear is completely off the charts, and actually that's incorrect. There's a few pieces here to look at. First and foremost, in terms of the Energy Act, Eskom has to own nuclear power stations in terms of the legislation. Again, that hasn't been changed. Again, another sign that that Jamat Peterson wasn't driving this heavy nuclear agenda. So we can't use the build, own, operate model. Eskom has to upfront own the nuclear power stations, which means that one, it's going to have some money to do that. Now, there's a few components here. Eskom doesn't have a very strong balance sheet. It's also been downgraded to junk. However, public statements have been made that there's been some level of profit this year, and that it probably wants to fund it off its balance sheet with kind of whatever. And then obviously there's this case of sovereign guarantees that could be issued by National Treasury. Now, about 350 billion rand of sovereign guarantees are tied up in Kusile and Medupi, and now there are rumors, very strong rumors coming out that the government probably plans to can 3 of the boilers at Kusile, and that would be a huge sunk cost, but what it would allow them to do is to transfer those guarantees that are being used there into guarantees for nuclear new build program. It's also currently, Eskom is also working very hard at the moment to push IPPs, the independent power producers, off its own balance sheet, have Treasury pay for that directly, so that it frees up space on its balance sheet. It has additional guarantees from Treasury, and then it will probably enter into some sort of JV with a nuclear vendor. In this case, we think it's Rosatom, who will be responsible for providing the main components of the equity needed up front. This will then result in Eskom having to sign what we call an offtake agreement or a power purchase agreement, and it is there where Russia will make its money. So it will kind of provide upfront capital, but then they will push for a very tough deal on the PPA so that it can extract significant value from the whole program, make a good return on investment, and then that will be passed on to the South African consumer via higher tariffs. So Eskom is currently telling us they can build nuclear for about 1 Rand 10 per kilowatt hour. People like Chris Yeland are telling us that's probably closer to 1 Rand 30, and I'm saying it's probably even higher than that, considering that Eskom is in a very weak position. Rosatom will be in a very strong position to extract a significant tariff, significant PPA from Eskom. So we're looking at a very high price of electricity here, and that's just sort of the upfront issues that are transparent. I mean, the potential for corruption in behind the scenes is hugely significant. It's a huge deal. At least 700 billion is one of the figures, up to R1 trillion. It's a massive amount of money. There are already rumors that a black economic empowerment partner has been found. They've already signed heads of agreement within Gauteng. So this thing is moving forward, and it's moving forward rapidly. Yeah, what we must make clear is that there are potential avenues for Eskom to explore around funding, and don't forget there's significant political will behind this. So, I mean, there are even specific rumors around Treasury possibly, applying for additional sovereign guarantees to apply to this project. I think that will be more difficult because of what's happened with junk status. I think the main focus is going to be to free up existing sovereign guarantees for Eskom, and that's mainly going to be impacting on Kusile and Medupi.
The new energy minister put a delay on the whole signing of IPPs. What's the future of IPPs in the country?
I think at the moment, with this minister and this government, I would say grave. We're going to be in a difficult situation. If Eskom actually gets it right not to sign further IPPs, it's going to throw the sector into great disarray. Investor confidence is going to be sapped. Don't forget, I mean, this is a sector that has delivered 200 billion Rand worth of investment into South Africa, and that's only for about half of the existing determination. That's 7,000 megawatts out of the 14 issued in terms of the ministerial determination. Eskom is committed to kind of essentially signing another 7,000 megawatts by 2020. And this is where it starts getting into a bit of a difficult situation, because in terms of the current determination, Eskom has to connect these guys by the additional capacity by 2020, plus the guys that have already, the 37 outstanding, which we're well aware of. And I mean, the Wind Association last year got a legal opinion that clearly stated that Eskom has no prerogative in determining who can and who cannot sign up once a ministerial determination has been issued. So I think we need to watch for the next steps. Will the minister force Eskom to sign the 37 outstandings? They might get that right, because the law is quite clear on the issue. However, I think for additional renewable capacity, I think the minister will either repeal the existing determination.
Based on what?
Well, she has it within her authority just to say that this is no longer a determination. I change my determination to whatever, based on the requirements of the IRP, or based on this idea that South Africa needs to only procure as much renewables capacity as we require. I mean, Eskom is claiming it's got a 5,600 megawatt kind of surplus on any given day, which is questionable. But, essentially there's another 7,000 waiting to be connected via IPPs. So if you've got 5, 6 free plus another 7, the case for nuclear becomes all of a sudden, why are we needing this very expensive technology if we've got all this surplus energy that's already committed? So she has to kill renewables if she's going to make a stronger case for nuclear. So expect that to come down the line.
I think a lot of people, when they think about nuclear, they look at those allegations around Rosatom and South Africa having some kind of corrupt deal, especially with the president. A lot of people don't look at the subcontracts, and what do you think about there in terms of corruption? Like, what are the you spoke about a black empowerment company. What are the kind of red flags there?
Well, I think we should be careful. I mean, signing a BE partner doesn't mean corruption, right? Let's be clear about that. But what it does mean is that the deal itself is moving forward if partners are already being lined up for local content production, for the local components. So Rosatom will only really be interested in building the nuclear component, but all the ancillary components around that will be up for grabs. And they're significant components, huge, significant contracts that will be placed around here. And I mean, we just have to look at the experience of Eskom and Kusile Medupi, the whole Hitachi thing with Chancellor House involved. Any sort of company that's in a trust evolved around a BE company could potentially be masking interests of the political elite or individuals who are corrupt. So, and who will then push for contracts to be allocated amongst their friends. So, there's huge component. I mean, it's a 1 trillion Rand deal, potentially. of which at least 30-40% is for the non-nuclear component. We're talking about 300 billion rand here. I mean, people are going to, the politicians are going to want their piece. And as we've seen through Eskom's relationship with the way coal contracts, the Tegeta Optimum thing last year, there are multiple vehicles in which to make this possible. And I mean, we're very well aware that there's a lot of fronting happening in terms of companies that are positioning themselves for very specific individuals in government, outside government, and who are aligned with the Zuma clique. So, yeah, I think we need to be very worried about the potential for corruption here.
And so finally, what is your role going forward?
Our role is to stop this thing dead. We will be working with civil society and through Parliament. We'll be insisting that all procurement documents for this deal have to be approved through Parliament. It's going to be difficult, but that will be our first strategy. Our second strategy is we're very much committed to a legal battle on this. Lawfare is going to be a key component, and we are already looking at ways that we can interdict this thing. We are briefing our lawyers, we're taking advice. So it will be a multiple program of using Parliament, using the courts, and then also at every single step of the way holding people to account. So the new minister can expect a rough ride from us. We're not going to take this down, take it lying down. Yeah.